only show that is 3 dimensions away from the final destination being called Final Destination 4. I'm your host, 3D Jake, and today we're looking at The Final Destination, released in August of 2009. The Final Destination, The Final Destination, is directed once again by David R. Elias, who helmed Final Destination 2, a movie that a lot of people would say is either their favorite or second favorite of the Final Destination movies. And I didn't know this when I was doing the research. I'm like, a lot of people really like Final Destination 2. Honestly, some people even prefer it over the original. Like, usually, and like, the weird thing is, like, the original's like the number 3 usually on the list. It's usually the favorite or part 3 or part 2. That's weird. I was like, wow, and everything. But yeah, apparently after Glenn Morgan and James Wan were working on Dragon Ball Evolution, so I guess yeah, they went back to like, hey, you know what? Everyone liked Final Destination 2, so let's get David R. Elias back. Which, you know what, I would have. I'm not gonna lie. If I was the producer of Final Destination, I would absolutely have gotten David R. Elias to come back, because you know what? The dude made one of the best Final Destination sequels. I mean, come on, why wouldn't you get him back? Unfortunately, this was a bad movie to get him back for, because he's not a bad director. I don't think the movie's badly directed. I just think really it's more or less, it just feels cheaply made. Like, it feels like something, like people have said this feels like a Sci-Fi Channel movie. I would agree with that. I mean, the movie like cost probably like around $10 million and made more than that on opening weekend. I mean, I think this probably is the cheapest Final Destination movie. I would believe you if you told me that. I did not look up the budget, but I'm pretty sure, this movie was made on pennies rather than made like with dollars. Like, part 3 feels more like they spent more on it than part 2, than part 4. Like, part 1, 2, and 3 feel like they actually have a budget. Even the fifth one feels like it has a budget. This one just feels like they made it for pennies on the dollar, and I think mainly is because of what happened. Oh, by the way, by the way, yeah, but I think really what it is, the reason why it was made cheaply is because I think because the 3D Avatar had just come out at the time, so basically, like that was like because it kicked off the 3D craze again, and so every movie was coming out like Clash of the Titans was coming out in 3D, Green Lantern was coming out in 3D, Marvel was starting to make Thor in 3D and everything, and so and I think that's what kind of took over, and so they're like, you know what? Let's make Final Destination in 3D, and you can definitely tell like there was 3D, like especially the opening credits and in the end was made in 3D, and it sometimes gets in a way of like because the visual effects, because it's in 3D, have to make the visual effects look like shit, and like the movie, I guess the majority, like with Friday the 13th Part 3, where I guess that the focus was like, hey, look, you know what, the focus took over was 3D kind of took over. The 3D kind of took over the budget, so like, look, we have to spend all our money on the 3D, so we're not going to have a good budget, so we have to like cut corners and cut costs. And even they, especially apparently the end of the movie, like, was the reason why it was done like in the opening credits, was because they didn't have a budget at the end. Like, they said we ran out of money, and so they just said, let's just do this. To which I'm like, wouldn't, because I understand, like, but I'm like, you had to go back on a computer and do that. Wouldn't it have been easier not to do? I mean, I guess maybe when they were making the opening credits, they said, hey, you know what, let's do it this way. I will say, yeah, but I mean, the movie hasn't. The cast is not bad. It's just they overact like goofy, like they just like the movie stars Bobby Campo, Nick Zano, Michaela Williamson, and Chantel Vincent. I think they're not bad in the movie. Like, you got like Bubba Gump from Forrest Gump, and he's not bad in the movie at all. I think actually he's the best character in the movie because he actually is well acted. And I think the lead is not bad either. Like, the B just seems like he would be like the best friend that gets killed kind of way, versus like the best friend in the movie who's like a douche, who's like feels almost like he'd be the bully in the movie if this was well written. I think the movie is poorly written. And I want to say it's a good, it's not because the writer, but like, you couldn't have wrote a better script, bro. I'm just saying. Like, I mean, a NASCAR disaster could be cool, and it just feels like there's like a couple of scenes I do like. Like, I like the the pool scene when he gets like and everything. I like the guy gets his gut sucked through the pool. Even though Sunny in Philadelphia kind of proved that that's bullshit, But there is some great stuff in the movie, and apparently this movie was shot in Louisiana. This is the only Final Destination movie not shot in Canada. They're shot in Louisiana, and I guess that was probably because it was cheaper to shoot there when they're, especially with the 3D budget. So they're like, you know what, let's shoot in New Orleans. And I'm happy. This is the only Final Destination movie shot in the United States. So I'm really happy about that. Yeah, and yeah, this movie's so bad it made me fart. That's how bad this movie is. It just made me just to fart. But yeah, I really enjoy. I do enjoy. I really enjoy though. Yeah, I do enjoy some aspects of this movie. Like I do enjoy like I don't think the cinematography. I know a lot of people complain about like I don't think the cinematography is bad, although it does look like it was more direct to video cinematography. I will say I think mostly the thing that I think hate is that the story just feels like none of these characters you can relate to. Like it doesn't feel like it just feels like oh they has a premonition and then it becomes an afterthought. It's like doesn't be like oh yeah like it doesn't become the main focus of the movie. And I think that's one thing that hurts the movie a lot because I'm so bad that like I'm so bad like like he's like oh I feel awful just he has a premonition and then it's like it kind of goes away. And then they also have like cliche characters like a racist dude and he's just like just the most crazy like and then like has the stupidest death. Like it feels like they took the death in Final Destination 2 where the dude gets blown up at the end and his hand lands on his mom's dinner plate. It feels like they took that idea and they're like it'd be really really funny if we did it like a racist dude and it blew up and his head landed on the black guy's lawn. That'd be really really funny. And apparently there's two racist people in the movie. Apparently they're like, you know what? We should do this again, man. That was so funny. Let's do this again with this old man, this old racist dude. Let's let him be racist to a Korean dude, and then let his pool like he'll just be dangling while his pool kills another dude. And I'm just thinking like this is stupid. At one point it becomes really stupid, especially you have like just it's stuff like that is where I'm like this is really dumb. But I do think there are some cool deaths. I mean, like I think the whole movie theater sequence is actually really cool. And I like how it's a premonition within a premonition where he hangs on, like you see her get sucked into like the escalator, and she gets killed. That I thought was really cool. And I also like, I also like how, whenever you see the car wash scene, I thought that was really well done, and I thought, oh wow, she's about to get murdered by a car wash. Those are things I really like in the movie, I do think the death, like where she gets killed by a rock, like by the lawnmower, that's stupid. I hated that. And then of course I hated like the guy just gets killed by a freaking like gas pump, gas like an air canister against the fence. I'm like that's stupid, and everything, and getting hit by an ambulance. I'm like that's dumb, like and just stuff like that. I was like this is stupid. I don't like this. But like the movie theater blowing up and then getting killed by an escalator, that's cool. Especially I liked how in the end he tries to prevent it, and then like it feels like death is actually like shoot like he gets a nail gun shot through the hand and like the fires. It's like he's about to live his reality, and that's what's so cool. I actually really enjoyed it, especially the 3D theater. I'm like that is what the movie should be made for. That right there, that sequence right there. But everything else, like I think the ending where they get killed by a truck, and then especially in 3D death, I'm like this is stupid, and like the opening credits are dumb, but I do like I do like though, there I do like stuff like like the obviously Bubba Gump from Forrest Gump. I thought he was great in the movie and everything, and how like he tries to like take his own life, but then he can't. And all I think is when the characters do become stupid though, really stupid when they're like, hey, we think it's over and everything, woohoo, we're going to the movies, and then like it's and I do like that they kept that secret of the cowboy surviving, and then when you see him alive and everything, I thought that was really cool. But just like things like that I like, and then there's things that just like it's really stupid in a way, and I really hate that about this movie. I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think it's like I would rather watch this over Dragon Ball Evolution. But I think this is a terrible movie. I don't think it's a terrible movie. I think it's just bad because it is definitely the worst Final Destination movie in the series. I don't think it's the worst, like, I don't think it's the absolute worst horror movie ever made. I just think it's just a worst Final Destination movie. Like, there's other horror movies I think that are worse. That I'd rather watch this over that. But if I had to give this movie a grade, I'm going to give it a D. Thank you.
Sharpton for president, y'all. I'm outie.
Jesse Jackson for VP.